Who are you and what is your role?
I am Morgan Bowler-Brown. I am the Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales candidate for Newport West.
Okay. What are the main policies of Plaid Cymru for those who don't know?
This election is about Brexit and the Tory government goal of getting a strong mandate for the negotiation ahead. So far, all the sound bites like this have achieved is putting the Brexit bill up from 60 to 100 million euros. Wales is in danger as the cruel and reckless Tories look back, set to try and bring our nation back under London rule. With Labour too weak and too divided to defend Wales, Plaid Cymru is the local party you can trust.
Okay. Apart from Brexit, what other policies does Plaid Cymru have?
Covered that in the Wales is in danger bit.
Right.
Sorry.
If elected, what will you aim to do for Newport?
Plaid Cymru has a positive post-Brexit plan. Everything about this election is focusing around Brexit as a topic. You know, with the defence of Welsh jobs at its very heart, Wales is at risk of losing the £680 million a year it currently receives in funding from the EU. Yes, it is our money, but it's money Wales wouldn't see if it didn't come direct from London. So, as looking at Newport and looking at what it's achieved and what it's benefited from while it's been a member of the EU, we've had 605 new enterprises, over 1,500 people helped into work, 675 in further education, over 4,000 qualifications have been gained and almost 1,500 jobs were created. All this is from the EU in Newport. During the referendum and during the campaign we were promised that Wales would not be a penny worse off. Plaid Cymru's goal is to make sure that we do make sure that they keep that promise. If a hard Brexit takes place, this and the 200,000 Welsh jobs will be taken away from the Welsh economy, and it will be the second time the Tories will be responsible for destroying our poorest communities and taking jobs away from Wales.
Yeah. You recently ran for local elections in Newport but didn't win a seat. What makes you think you're ready to run for MP?
My decision to stand was purely on a one of choice. There should always be the option to vote for the party you believe in on the ballot paper. In Newport West we do have Paul Flynn, who is a seasoned Welsh-speaking, Republican-leaning Labour MP, and he has been very good for the people of Newport West. I am standing, like I said, basically to make sure the choice of Plaid Cymru is on the ballot paper, because we do often find that we have a steady group of people who want to vote for Plaid Cymru in Newport. If I did not stand, there would not be a name on the ballot paper, and that's not acceptable.
What has Plaid Cymru done for Newport in the past then?
In the past, we've had members on the council. We've always looked out for the best interests of the people of Newport, and with our regional AM, Stephen Williams, in the Assembly, there's been plenty of cases that we've looked at for helping local people with local issues. As this is more about the MPs and Westminster, we've not had an MP before. We've looked at leading campaigns across the city, but as we've not had an MP before, we look at examples set by our MPs across Wales, and the Times says that Wales and its Plaid Cymru MPs are the hardest working MPs in the Assembly. So we've not had the opportunity to serve the people of Newport as well as we have elsewhere, because we've not had an MP before. But this is something that could change.
Why do you think SNP have had MPs in Parliament but not Plaid Cymru?
It's an interesting one, because when you compare Scotland and Wales, or you compare the SNP and Plaid, it's a bit of a deflective question. You should really be asking the question of why is Scotland better than Wales as far as its services goes, and why isn't Wales's education or NHS as good as it is in Scotland? And then that directs it back, because they devolved matters, that directs it back to Labour, and since 1999 in the Senate and since devolution, they've consistently held power, sometimes in partnership with the likes of Plaid and other groups, but the failings are on Labour.
Okay. Why does Wales need its own party?
Wales needs a party that can stand up for it. If you look at England and you look at the message the Labour Party in England are saying, they are the alternative party, the anti-government party, and that they will stick up for the rights of the people in England. Unfortunately, every time Jeremy Corbyn comes into Wales and tries to say that same message, here his party are the establishment. Wales needs a strong voice in Westminster to make sure the 200,000 jobs that we're going to rely on, we're going to lose as part of leaving, or at risk as part of leaving the EU. We need to make sure they're saved. We need to ensure that we get parity with other parts of the UK and better funding for parts of Wales. And as we've said, there's hundreds of millions of pounds that we're potentially going to lose, while being promised that there's there's not a penny less worse off, as part of leaving. That's something that Wales needs to defend itself for. As I said in the beginning, Wales is in danger. Paragraph 4.2 of the Great Repeal Bill clearly states that devolved areas such as agriculture, the environment and transport will go back to Westminster instead of the Senedd. Our message to Westminster is this, hands off our assembly. The Welsh people may have voted for Brexit, but in 1997 they voted for devolution, and again in 2011 they voted to strengthen its powers. The vote was to take back control, but it was not to take back control from Cardiff.
Well, staying on that point, Wales voted to leave the EU. However, the leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood, has said the party will now prioritise a campaign for Welsh independence. Why should Wales vote for a party that goes against the wishes and votes of the people?
Let's be clear, right? A Wales that's successful and confident enough to vote for independence, standing on its own 2 feet, is an ambition that everyone shares, everyone in the party shares. But let's be clear, this is a UK election and it's not about Welsh independence. Welsh independence is a matter for the Assembly, not Westminster, and any vote on independence would have to be started by AMs and not MPs. Our job is to defend Wales, standing on a strong Welsh Plaid Cymru team of MPs to champion the interests of Wales in London. Independence is a different conversation for a different group of people at a different time.
So why would people vote for Plaid Cymru to be in UK government, whose only interest is Wales, not the UK?
It's a strong voice for Wales in Westminster is what the people of Wales deserve. It's not necessarily Welsh people. Anyone who lives here deserves the voice of protecting the services and protecting the devolved matters that Wales has now.
Right. Why do you think people will vote for you when the majority of South Wales, including Newport, have always voted Labour for generations?
So it's an interesting one. I'm not going to use the same old cliche of people will always vote Labour because that's not. It's time for a change. You look at Wales, and like I said this earlier on, when Jeremy Corbyn comes to Wales, his party is the establishment. For as long as I've been politically motivated, I've always seen the Labour Party as the party that's holding Wales back. What have they achieved in the last, since 1997, since 1999 when the Senedd was formed? Wales, there's always been that power. There does need to be a shift to a different party to give someone else a chance. I do not believe for a second that should be the Tories. And I think in Wales we need to give a strong voice, because if you look at Scotland, that you said earlier on about comparing Wales and Scotland, look at the SNP in Scotland and how strong they've been and how they have influenced UK-wide policy, even though there's devolved matters such in Scotland as there is in Wales. When it came down to more involvement of privatisation in the English NHS, Scotland were there to vote against it, and the SNP were there to vote against it because they knew that would have a knock-on effect on them in Scotland. That's what Wales needs, and that's what Plaid Cymru would do. Would be looking at the impact of the knock-on effects of laws that happen across the UK and how they would affect Wales.
Are you willing to work with the SNP to get ideas from them?
Oh, it's a great example of LGBT plus inclusive education in schools. That's something that the SNP have recently put in their collection of policies. They are very pro having that as one example of a policy that we would have already looked to copy, because it is a great policy with no issue for us there. As education is a devolved matter, though, that's an example of a policy that we would happily copy because it's a good policy. It's not about not having our own ideas. We've got plenty of our own ideas, but it's good to look at other progressive parts of the world and say, what are they doing there that we would also like to achieve? Things like abolishing car parking fees. That's something that came originally from Scotland. It's a no-brainer, really. We shouldn't be worried about taking and looking at other areas that have good ideas and saying that will work for us too.
Do you think SNP want to work with Plaid Cymru?
I think you see the old photo of all the women at the last general election having a big hug, and that is the prime example of the Progressive Alliance working together. Because at the end of the day, the amount of seats in Westminster in England versus the seats in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, England comes out on top every time just because of the way that the lines are drawn. And there's going to be changes to the boundaries again soon that potentially mean that Wales could lose further MPs and have even less of a voice in London. But that then in turn should mean an increase in the number of AMs and there's more devolved powers to the Assembly to balance that. If Wales's voice is going to be made quieter in London, the voice in Cardiff should get louder as a result.
When people vote for an alternative party, they seem to vote for Green. They're quite established. What's the difference between Green and Plaid Cymru? Why would people vote for Green and not Plaid?
Well, the point of the Green Party of England and Wales, and that's what you've got to remember they are. They're the Green Party of England and Wales, unlike Plaid Cymru, which is just the Party of Wales. The majority of policies from the Green Party stem from a care for the environment, and absolutely I am in line with them 100% when it comes to the environment. We should be doing a lot more as a country and as the world to make sure our environment is healthy and is there for the future generations. However, their policies on other things that are away from the environment are almost an afterthought, whereas Plaid Cymru is the Party of Wales that looks out for the opinions and looks out for the people who live in Wales, not just on a single topic. So, you know, the Green Party's raison d'etre is the environment. UKIP's reason for existing was getting us out of the UK. Oh, sorry, getting us out of the EU. And Plaid Cymru's reason for existing, people would often say, is independence. Independence is definitely one of the core things, but it's not a point for this election. At this election, our core policy is looking out for the people of Wales and defending Welsh interests when it comes to this forthcoming negotiation.
You mentioned environment. Do you agree with the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon? I
do. I think it's a massive investment in the local area that will have many benefits and knock-on effects of the to the local economy. That alone means that we're investing in parts of Wales that haven't seen money for a very long time. Wales has always been underfunded, and this is one example of things that are positive investments. There's lots of other examples around Wales that could happen that could be seen as negative or slightly negatively impacting the environment. You've got things like Electricity Mountain 2.0, you know, big investment projects that could mean that water and power generation in Wales could be, you know, increased. That's a natural resource that we have the potential to have a lot more control over in Wales. Whenever you mention water to some of the older people, particularly Plaid supporters, it's always a bit of a touchy subject. People don't like talking about the failings of the British government defending Wales prior, you know. But yes, I do support the tidal lagoon.
At the moment, the NHS is a big topic. If elected, what will you do concerning the NHS?
Currently, the NHS in Wales, again, its health is a devolved matter. So we can talk about what we would do nationally, and that would be definitely stopping the Tory privatisation of the NHS in England, or doing everything in our power to slow and stop that, because that will have a knock-on effect on the NHS in Wales. Funding currently in Wales needs improvement. However, we do have lots of areas that we can look at to be smart with the money that we spend. It's not about throwing more money at the problem until it goes away, because that will almost always never work. With an ageing population, with larger groups of people that need the support of the NHS, just throwing money at it isn't going to work. You need to be smarter. You can look at, even though the NHS is devolved, there's nothing saying we can't look at cross-party work across England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland to look at what things we buy as a group, and things, you know, they did it in the police force where they looked at uniform purchasing across the whole of Britain. Making one order for everyone meant that there was a massive saving across the board. Smart things like that could be beneficial, and we would look at what alternative ideas we can have. However, you look at the NHS in Wales, and there are definite failings from the Labour government. Because it's a devolved matter. It goes back to, can we trust Labour to defend Wales? Looking at the actions taken by Labour and looking at the Welsh Government in Cardiff Bay, I think we can't.
On the topic of Brexit, Leanne Wood did actually say, you know, she said about prioritising Welsh independence, but Wales, 17 out of 22 councils, actually did vote to leave, and people at the moment will be voting for Conservative to make sure that the referendum does go through. So why should people vote for Plaid and not Conservative on the matter of Brexit?
So let's be clear. We said, you know, the UK referendum on leaving the EU, we accepted that result from the absolute day. As a party, it was a democratic decision. It was made. And as a party, I campaigned against leaving, as did many of my friends. But as a party, we accepted that result the day after. Personally, I sort of went through the 5 stages of grief. You know, if you don't know the 5 stages, it ends with acceptance. It took me a little longer to get there, but now, you know, we're at the point where we need to move on and focus on getting the deal that works for Wales. So that means no deal that places tariffs on Welsh exports. 200,000 Welsh jobs rely on access to the single market, and we need to make sure that remains. My day job is one of those jobs that could be at risk. It's obviously very important to me and the people who I work with. particularly because a lot of them are EU nationals. There's always the question on another referendum at the end. The decision's been made. We need to focus on the negotiations now, and making sure the whole strong mandate, it's nothing but a soundbite. It's really not helping at the moment. The person that's going to negotiate hasn't done a particularly good job so far of keeping people on side. There's no point in making insults and not keeping your negotiating partners on side if you're going to have to talk to them about what you want to achieve.
So you've accepted the results.
Yeah.
Who do you want to be the negotiator?
To be fair, okay, we said this already, we are a nation of nations. We are Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England. Arguably parts of England should have different members as well, but we should go as a team of negotiators, each team looking at out for the interests of their own area. And there's nothing saying we can't do that. However, it seems to be Theresa May this week saying, if I lose 6 seats, well, and it's also again her going, if I don't get my team of people. At the end of the day, we are one country. The whole country, cross parties voted for different things. Some people wanted to stay, some people want to leave. The opinions of every single person in this country should still be respected and represented at the negotiations. It should be a cross-party and cross-country team of people.
In Plaid's manifesto, it states that Wales is at threat of losing the £880 million a year it currently receives in funding from the EU. Where does the number come from? And if it's true, what's your plan of action to tackle this if elected?
So the money that's mentioned there, it's not just in structural funding, but it's also things like the impact to the Welsh economy from international students. So international students bring in £400 million every single year to the Welsh economy. That's not nothing, We also think about the £680 million a year currently received from the EU, the structural funding and things like that. That's the Welsh share of that is enough to build a new hospital every month. That's the point of arguing that we were promised not a penny worse off. Lots of arguments could be made for the money that was coming in previously and what it was spent on and how it was talked about and how the positives were spun and that impacted people's decisions of how they voted. However, a big part of it was we would not be a penny worse off. That's the point of Plaid Cymru, is to make sure that number is kept at that level.
How will they do that?
That's why we need a strong team of Plaid Cymru MPs to influence the path of the negotiations. That's why I said before that Wales should have a seat at the negotiating table as well, to fight the corner of the people of Wales, and that arguably should be someone from the Assembly or from the group of who runs the Assembly, as it's a devolved Parliament. Our Welsh Assembly is run by a different party than Westminster is currently or was previously, and after the next election it looks likely that it will be again. Then, because of the devolved matters, it should be someone from the leading party in the Assembly going, which would be Labour in Wales, or Welsh Labour. In Scotland, it should be someone from the SNP going, and then that's how you would achieve that, is by not letting one person or one group of people with one set opinion, which will be different to everyone else. Because at the end of the day, it was a very close referendum. Different people have different opinions. It's still a very divisive subject now, but the point is you can't have the winning side going with their opinion of what is right for everyone, because it's not everyone's opinion. Not everyone who voted to leave voted for a hard Brexit. Because would they have voted for losing 200,000 Welsh jobs? I don't believe for a second they would have. The stats I mentioned earlier, the almost 1,500 jobs created just in Newport alone from the investments from the EU. Did they vote to potentially remove funding from those jobs and risk those jobs as well? No, they did not. That was never on a question on the ballot paper.
You mentioned the 400 million from international students. Where does the other 440 million come from?
So it's not. Let's say it's from lots of different areas. The main ones are the investment grants from the EU, and then it's the benefits to the economy. So, like I say, the 400 million for the international students, but then our agricultural sector as well. So we managed to have lots of trade between our agricultural sector in Wales and mainland Europe. And then it's the knock-on effect to our economy that we would lose, rather than a big number from one pot. It comes from lots of different areas.
On the topic of business, where does Plaid Cymru stand on private and public business?
So if we look at transport, for example, and the Labour manifesto pledge of renationalising almost everything, there are lots of pros and cons to doing that. However, if you've ever been on the Arriva trains line between Cardiff and Merthyr, particularly at certain times of day, it's impossible. The fact we've got a train line that goes into Newport but bypasses us almost entirely from train stations north of here to go to Cardiff, that's not okay. But that's a decision made by a private company. As a nationalised train company, if there was one, we could petition as the government to make sure that those lines are reopened and the trains do come from north of Newport into Newport before it goes out. Things like that, you know, there are lots of positives to having more control from a nationalised company as the end users. The companies currently are obliged to make sure their shareholders are happy first. At the end of the day, a nationalised company, who are the shareholders but the people who use the service, the people who live in the country? Surely you can think, if you were a shareholder in a company, you were the end service user, it'd be a positive.
Currently, there are councils working with private businesses, for example, the University of South Wales, to try and avoid being asset stripped and also have influence on certain judgments made. What kind of stance does Plaid have on universities being private, not public?
So the one you mentioned there is quite an interesting one, mainly because the reason behind why they're losing funding, and what that funding, where they're accounting for that loss of budget. So the University of South Wales is talking about getting rid of its childcare facilities for the students with young children. Is it really suitable to take away childcare facilities so people can't go to university? You know, when arguably those people who would be going there to study with the young children would be some of the people that wouldn't require the support of those services to carry on their studies. If the services aren't there in order to look after their children while they study, they can't study, therefore they lose their ability to have further education. I fully support councils that will go out of their way to make sure the backbone services of facilities like universities are maintained, if only because it helps people stay in education. And the longer you are in education, arguably the better product you will be at the end of it, the better, more productive member of society you'll be at the end of it. And I'm saying this as someone who didn't go to university.
What will Plaid do on trying to repossess or own private properties, private business properties and assets? The
amount of unused property at the moment, particularly housing, is astonishing. And you know, there's a lot of work being done in Cardiff, our neighbouring city, about this one issue where housing is such a big issue, yet there is a large number of just abandoned properties. I'm not advocating in any way we should just take property off people. It's a bit too extreme. However, if a property is left abandoned and there is absolutely no intention from the owner to make it usable, make it viable, then we should be using compulsory purchase and options such as that to make sure those properties can be put back into the public use. Business properties is a bit different because while we do want to encourage small business owners and things like that, it's not as fundamental as putting a roof over someone's head, you know. And we know that homelessness is a problem in some parts of Wales more than others, and that if we had more council properties, then we should be able to house these people quicker and better. However, when we look at new build properties and things like that, the fact that we are making sure those developments have social housing included in the production, then that's an easy stepping stone to increasing that doesn't involve taking property from people or compulsory purchase.
When it comes to Friars Walk was funded by public spending, yet it's in the private sector. Do you believe that it should be in the private sector or it should be in the public sector?
So, Friars Walk being the shopping centre that was responsible for getting rid of our mural, that one, yeah? Yeah, there's a lot to be said for my opinions of the way that entire build was handled. The fact that we're already seeing some shops shut in Friars Walk is a good example of how badly it's being run currently, or and what we should be doing to change it. There is an argument for Newport Council being more involved and the running of it maybe being done in a more centralised way. But on the other side of it, there is also an argument for removing the red tape that would come with public involvement and letting it be run as a separate business.
So you think it should be in the public sector?
I think there should be more involvement, definitely, to make sure smaller businesses have access to it as well.
Do you think the rent's too high?
So at the moment, my wife is opening a cafe. We did look at different areas, Newport one of them. And across Wales, rent being too high for small businesses is a big barrier to opening new businesses. Friars Walk is no exception. The rent for businesses is obscene in that.
Is it realistic to lower the rent? Is it possible?
It is always possible. Nothing is impossible. However, we would have to determine it would have to be on a case-by-case basis, which then in turn makes it harder to deliver. Because I wouldn't be happy to say that a large business that is a FTSE 100 company should be given the same rates as a small fruit and veg salesman, or a greengrocer's or a butcher's or a local business. A small family business should be given extra support to run in a place such as that. But then again, that's the shopping centre that's not designed for small businesses. It's designed for large business from the ground up to try and encourage those sorts of businesses to come here. If they don't want to come here, or they are finding it harder to make it successful staying here, then all we're going to have is a rundown shopping centre in 20 years' time that no one goes to.
When it comes to setting up small businesses, one of the overwhelming fears is debt, and also fear of endangering a person's credit rating. Would the words applied do anything to actively give out grants or risk-free loans? What kind of plans would they implement to actually help small businesses?
So there's already Welsh government departments such as the WDA and things that do this to an extent. And you're right. Using my wife as an example again, it was a real challenge, and it's a lot about self-belief. The last time I was here and I spoke to you guys, I spoke quite a lot about the recent speech I did in the Riverfront Centre and how a lot of decisions you make in life are all down to, do you believe in yourself enough to take that risk? And if you haven't got the confidence in yourself to do that, it's very hard to push yourself to take that risk. However, there should always be a risk attached to borrowing money, because you can't take money with no expectation to pay it back. Otherwise, you will never pay it back. And that money is got to be borrowed from someone. If it's coming from the public purse, then it's effectively coming from your own pockets. And that money could and should be spent on things that will have a return on investment to enable us to carry on reinvesting in other people as well. So while I agree there should be a government central bank or a Welsh bank that would be able to invest in its people and help people start up. For example, Plaid Cymru has its own credit agency. We will lend money to members of the party if they feel they need it. If there's an investment they want to make, we will invest in their decisions. And there should be a national level of that, but there should always be the requirement to pay it back, because otherwise there'll be no money left for everyone else.
On topic of credit rating, one of the issues currently that faces Britain as a whole is housing affordability. So do you believe that this should be done to counteract damage towards credit rating with loans with less risk than going to your bank?
So there is an argument to be made for the Help to Buy scheme and things like that. That was a step in the right direction, definitely, but it wasn't. It didn't go far enough from my personal side. I live in a rented house at the moment, looking to buy a house and having the requirement to get a percentage deposit prior to being able to do that makes it very difficult for me, because of the fact that the money I spend on renting makes it difficult to save. So at the end of every year, I make the decision of, do I want to keep that money and put it towards buying a house, or do I want to go on a holiday and spend time with my family in a nice sunny place for a week? That's the sort of decisions, and I'm not alone in that. Lots of people have to make that decision every single year. We want to be able to keep mortgage prices affordable. The lower house prices will come from building more houses. The more houses that are on the market, the lower value that they will receive. So that's the argument, particularly around mortgages, is to look at house prices and making sure there are affordable houses out there for everyone. And the more houses we have, the better that would be, the more likely that would be.
Staying on the theme of business, do you see 0-hour contracts as a problem? If so, what will you do about them if elected?
There are very few people or very few sections of society that I genuinely believe 0-hour contracts benefit the worker. almost every section of society or section of business that uses 0 hours contracts, in my opinion, is purely for the benefit of the business and no one else. A personal experience I have of this was about 6 months ago. I was driving home from work, and it was dark. It was just after Christmas, and I saw a man on the side of the road getting very frustrated with his broken bicycle. So I thought, you know what, I'll go and see what's up with him. And after I helped him fix his bike, it was to the point where he had a puncture and we couldn't fully repair it. So we put it in the back of my car, and I said, don't worry, I'll drop you home. Where do you live? It just happened to be the other side of Newport. That'll teach me for being nice. But I did. On the way back, we had a great chat about, well, if he's on the other side of Newport, quite late at night, about 9:30 at night, why was he cycling over this side of Newport? And he's explaining that he was a contractor. He was a 0 hours contract for a large supermarket that just happens to be on the other side of the city. He was given a phone call, said, we need you to work the night shift. He got there, was told, actually, no, you're not needed now. So he cycled all the way from the other side of Newport to that, to be told, go away, you're not needed. That's not okay. He should have had the travel time funded at the very least, but he didn't. He was also then told he wasn't needed for the night shift, so he didn't earn anything at all, and that was okay because he was on a 0 hours contract. There's a lot of things being shouted about at the moment about how unemployment is at the lowest levels for a very long time. Well, that's okay as long as those jobs are actually worthwhile jobs having, and the reality is the majority of them will be 0 hours contracts that don't affect individuals or impact individuals' lives in any way because they can't afford to live. If your job that you do doesn't give you enough money to pay your bills and live, then it's not a job that's worthwhile having. And 0 hours contracts are a big example of that. Labour saying they're going to abolish 0 hours contracts or remove 0 hours contracts, specifically in the care industry, when they've had 7 chances to vote with Plaid Cymru and deliver that in Wales previously in the Assembly. Yet, like I said, 7 times they voted it down, doesn't give me much faith that they're actually going to deliver on that promise in Wales, because at the end of the day it is still a devolved matter that would still have to go through the Assembly. They can say at a national level or an English level that's what the Labour Party of England are going to do, but in Wales, Welsh Labour have had the opportunity and failed to on multiple occasions.
So what's the disadvantage of UK government getting rid of 0 hour contracts? Why are they so reluctant to do it?
Because, like I said, it goes back to it's the businesses that benefit. The UK government previously, the Tory government that we've had previously, it's in their interest and the interest of their business owner friends to keep 0 hours contract because of the businesses that are the ones that have it. It's particularly 0 hours contracts that have clauses that mean you can't go and find contract work elsewhere as well. Those are literally having the cake and eating it too on behalf of the businesses. And it's not acceptable that workers have to wait on a day-to-day phone call of, can I work today? And if I can't work, I can't then go and work anywhere else because I've got it in my contract that says I can't.
You mentioned unemployment. The unemployment rate in Wales is higher than the UK's as a whole, at 4.8%. If elected, what will you do to get people into work?
So, at the moment, like I said, the unemployment rate or is its lowest term ever, but it needs to be accurate. It's sort of like saying, it's going really well. Everyone can get from A to B. However, they've got to walk there. It's not like saying everyone's got freedom of movement. Everyone can go wherever they want. However, how they get there is the reality, the important part of this. There needs to be more training. There needs to be a lot more imposition on businesses to have development of people. So where I work currently, I work in a factory that has a gold standard in development of people, and everyone that starts there has the opportunity to go into further learning through the internal academy that give them recognised qualifications that are recognised outside of the business. And it goes back to then every business should be encouraged to treat their workers with good enough to leave but happy enough to stay. So if a business has a high turnover of staff, they're not going to be able to develop their people. They're not going to be able to grow as a business. They're not going to be able to become a really successful business and then in turn employ more people. That's what we want to do. It goes back to, again, small businesses being the backbone of our economy, and the more small businesses that exist, the more people that they hire. The more people they hire, the more successful they are. The more successful they are, the bigger their business becomes, the more tax they pay, and again, the more people they employ.
It's no secret that, looking at it on the other side, that people live on benefits who can work. Is there something you do about that?
Okay, so benefits exist to support those who work hardest in our society. Less than 10% of benefits claimants are actually classed as unemployed. Less than 1% of benefits claims are claimed fraudulently. Tax evasion and avoidance costs the UK about 100 times more than benefit fraud. I don't believe that the argument and the stereotyping of people on benefits and the negative stories that are always printed on the front page of certain newspapers are representative of the truth. Those individual cases may be true. They will definitely be embellished and definitely be exaggerated. However, they will not always be representative of the actual story. You know, like I said, tax evasion costs us more than benefit fraud.
Millions of pounds is spent on the Welsh language each year due to the Welsh Language Act. Do you think this is a waste of money, since the vast majority never use the Welsh language they learn in school, and the vast majority of people in South Wales don't speak it or want it?
I challenge your don't speak it or want it in particular, because that is not true from my experiences. Okay, so I am not a Welsh speaker. My mother is not a Welsh speaker. My sister is not a Welsh speaker. We are all learning because we want to learn our national language. This is only being encouraged by the work of the Welsh Assembly to try and encourage Welsh speakers and Welsh learners. There's so much out there for people who want to learn, and I am seeing more and more and more people putting themselves forward to learn. This is not a Plaid Cymru policy of, you know, your typical stereotype of a Plaid Cymru member shouting about nothing but the language for wearing and getting the English back over the border. That's absolute rubbish, and it really works me up, because as a party as well, we have a non-Welsh speaker as a leader for the first time ever. That says a lot about our opinion of the language, that it is important. Okay, it's not the be all and end all of Plaid Cymru. However, the Welsh government should be doing a lot more to support the Welsh language. The fact that in the city of Newport, to stand for this election, I had to go and ask specifically for the forms in Welsh when they were freely available in English, but they weren't following the government's own guidelines on how information is available. It should always be available bilingually, and it wasn't, and that's something I'm taking up separately. However, you know, the money that's being spent on it is even now not enough. There should always be more money spent on the Welsh language. Only this week we've had the case in Northern Ireland, an island, about the Irish language there. You know, people are very, very protective of their culture and their history. It was said yesterday by the man from UKIP, you know, by Stan from UKIP. He's absolutely right on that. That the people of Britain and their individual parts are very protective of their culture and their history. And the Welsh language has already been tried once to be killed off. And it's luck more than anything that we have the amount of Welsh speakers we do now, purely because of the people keeping it alive. Yeah. So the money that the Welsh government is spending on keeping that language alive and improving the number of Welsh speakers, it is positive. For the first time, this time last year, I met someone who had grown up only speaking Welsh, and in the same way that you and I learnt Welsh in school, learn English in school. And to me, that doesn't. It's a very difficult thing for my English first language person to comprehend. We're always told that people don't want the Welsh language. There are people who only speak the Welsh language. You know, in this country, they do still exist. They are still there. There is not, there's not many that only speak Welsh now, because of the fact that as a country, everything is bilingual. By law, it has to be, because we have to accept that there are people out there that will prefer and will have a primary language of Welsh. One of our candidates in West Wales, he's the person I'm on about. You know, he opened my eyes to the fact that the Welsh language is such a fundamental part of our culture. To let it die out is unacceptable. And the fact that there are still large parts of Wales, not just North Wales, but large parts of the entire country that do have entire Welsh-speaking communities and have Welsh priorities now of increasing the number of Welsh school places, Welsh-speaking primary school places, because they have more and more young people speaking Welsh than they ever have before. The priorities in some parts of Wales are actually to reduce the number of English-speaking school places reduce the number of English-speaking school places and increase the number of Welsh-speaking school places to accommodate this increase in Welsh speakers.
As I mentioned in that question, the vast majority of people in South Wales don't speak it. So why is it compulsory in school?
Because as a country, we've had policies in the past to kill off the language. This is a counteractive policy. That's all it is. The Welsh language was actively targeted to try and kill it off by governments of the past. There was decisions made that children would be marked on certain registers if they spoke Welsh in school. There was horrible treatment of school children, if they spoke Welsh in school, deliberately to try and kill off the language. There were people in some employments that were given were given notice of unemployment because of the fact they spoke Welsh. That's an active targeting of the language previously, and this policy of teaching it to young people in schools and making it compulsory up to GCSE level is to try and encourage these people to learn the language more. And I am one of those people. I didn't, Welsh lessons for me was on a Friday afternoon. By last thing on a Friday, I was falling asleep in class. As an adult now, I look back and think what a wasted opportunity I had. And that's why I'm learning Welsh in my own time now. Because I believe the language should have an element of Welsh speakers.
The final area I want to touch on is immigration. If elected, what will you do about immigration?
So, like I said earlier, I work in a factory with people from all over the world. Immigration is a positive thing, and I see the positives every day. Where I work is not unique, not in the UK, not in Wales. Agricultural sector, 65% of the EU workforce, 65% of the workforce is from the EU. Our NHS heavily relies on immigration. And as I said earlier again, the international students bring in £400 million to the Welsh economy every year. Our immigration policy is about defending Wales from policies that would damage our economy. So we want a system that's made in Wales, and regional immigration works. It does. In Australia, even UKIP supports the Australian model. Different visas for different parts of the country is achievable. Targets should be based on things like growing our economy, increasing wages for everyone, and keeping mortgages affordable. I'm sure everyone wants an immigration policy where hard-working people who want to come here and contribute continue to do so.
What about the non-hard-working people?
So I was at the Welsh Leaders debate the other evening, and it was a discussion between a member of the audience whose wife is a Polish person, and she works in the University of Wales. And Neil Hammond's answer was basically, oh, well, she's the good type of immigrant. We want her to stay. However, the Romanians and the other Eastern Europeans, we don't want them here. That was absolutely disgusting answer. And then for Karen Jones to sort of follow up with, oh, but they can stay here for 3 months and then they can have to go back if they've not got a job. That doesn't sit well with me at all. If you've ever been unemployed, getting a job is not that easy. Finding a job can take longer than 3 months. At one point I was searching for a job for over 6 months before I even got an interview. It's not that easy. And to say that just because they're not from the UK originally that they have to go is not okay. I don't believe that people coming, it's the whole Schrodinger's illegal immigrant thing. People don't come here illegally and claim benefits because they can't. People who come here illegally can't legally work. So it's not an immigration problem that allows that. It's an enforcement of the law problem that allows that. There are lots of positives for immigration, and the only people that I ever seem to find that don't agree with me is people who've never had a conversation with someone from outside of the UK.
With the population of Wales, would you be welcoming on perhaps increasing the population beyond 3 million, potentially to 4 million or 5 million over the next few years?
Wales is going to grow quite naturally anyway, and the fact that I've met people from outside of Wales. So I had a really interesting experience where I walked into a kebab shop in North Wales, and I was on a Saturday night. I was up there for the Pride Cymru conference. It threw me because the first thing he said, the man behind the bar that was from Eastern Europe said to me was not in English, and I knew it was Welsh, but I said I'm not a Welsh speaker. He had come here and made the absolute choice of setting up a business, working hard, learning the language, and becoming a productive member of the society. Yeah, so I don't believe that if the population grows, then it has to be with Welsh people being born. That sounds like a very disturbing option to increase the population. The population will grow naturally, and that will be a healthy mix of people who were born here and from historically Welsh people. But it will also be people who have come here from other countries and who are second, third, fourth generation immigrants. Because at the end of the day, being Welsh is not about where your parents come from. It's about how you feel. To me, I'm a big believer that being Welsh is not anything other than a mental state, a state of mind.
I was going to say what state of mind, but that's a massive question.
What state of mind?
Yeah, what is the state of mind of
Get into
Welsh?
culture.
The easiest way to compare this is think about whenever there's football on or wherever there's Six Nations on, that absolute ecstatic feeling you get coming off the train at Queen Street Station or Cardiff Central Station, yeah, and you're surrounded by people just happy and chanting and excited, and everyone's getting on. There's no arguments. It's that. If you could bottle that would be Welsh. That would be Welshness. the fact that it's a little bit disappointing, it only ever seems to come out at sports times. You know, we don't have that feeling day in, day out, and the question is why not? And that's the mentality that I'm trying to encourage people to start thinking about is, how do you feel about where you live? Are you proud of where you live? Are you proud of being Welsh? Are you proud of living in Newport and being a Welsh, Newportonian? Are you proud of what you do? If not, why not? Think about what you want to change in your area. Get involved in the local community. Talk about with your neighbours about the problems that you collectively face. Look at the problems and find solutions as a group. You know, that's Welshness. That's what the state of mind is. And I found more people from the local community in Newport that want to make Newport a better place that aren't originally from Newport, because of the fact that it's a state of mind. It's not about, you know, what job you do, which country you're from, what language you speak.
How does Plaid Cymru plan to support and be the voice for the gay and bisexual men in Chechnya facing prison, physical abuse and torture for being themselves?
So currently the UK Foreign Office has officials in Moscow lobbying the Russian government. And, you know, this is fine because Putin believes that there's nothing going on in Chechnya. Obviously, this isn't good enough, and we see many parallels between Germany and the Second World War and what's going on currently. Recent declassified documents showed that the camps back then were known about years before the invasion of Europe, but the government at the time sat on its hands then, as it is now. The question was asked by a champion of the LGBT plus community in Newport, and at this point I remember a famous poem by a victim of the last camps, Martin Niemöller. He wrote the poem First They Came. Do you know it? No. So basically it goes, first they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the Jews, I wasn't Jewish. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. You know, that's basically the rough end of it. You know, if this was written today, it would start, first they came for the gay men of Chechnya. I'm not gay, nor am I Chechen. But I am an ally of the LGBT plus community, and I will not sit on my hands in silence. Plaid Cymru will challenge the Tory government to find a solution quickly for those at risk and to make sure they're safe. If that means petitioning the UN or providing sanctuary, I'm all for it. It's got to be anything but sitting on our hands.